Now, I am a firm believer in freedom of speech, especially in art, pushing the boundaries, reveal truths. However, there is a line, especially when it comes to speech that causes harm or displays acts of violence that break the law of ethics. So today on Top 5 Scary Videos, I'm going to be counting down our list of the top 5 scary horror movies that are illegal. Before we begin though, be sure to stick around until the end of the video where I'll be responding to some of your comments. And with that, let's jump in. Coming in at 5, Cannibal Holocaust. Released in 1980 and directed by Ruggero Deodato, this movie centers on a rescue mission into the Amazon rainforest, which results in a surprising discovery when a professor stumbles across lost film shot by a missing documentary crew, whose goal was to study the region's indigenous cannibalistic tribes. Now, Cannibal Holocaust was one of the very first found footage horror movies, which actually led to the director being arrested for suspicion of murder. Now, what makes this movie so disgusting is the fact that actual animals were killed on screen, making the fake deaths of the humans more believable. In order to sell the illusion, the actors' contracts prevented them from appearing in any other TV shows or movies for a year after its release, in order to sell the fact they were supposed to be dead. Now, this eventually came back to haunt the director, who was arrested by Italian authorities shortly after the movie's premiere in Milan on charges of obscenity and suspicion of making a snuff film. The director was forced to demonstrate the movie's special effects, as well as confirm that the actors were in fact still alive. The real animal killings, however, still led to the film being banned by the authorities, a judgment that was echoed by Australia, Norway, Finland, and New Zealand. Coming in at number 4, Salò or 120 Days of Sodom. This movie, released back in 1975, centers on a group of fascists who round up 9 adolescent boys and girls and subject them to 120 days of physical, mental, and sexual torture. The movie as a whole is a metaphor for fascism and abuse by the state. The movie is perhaps one of the most disturbing and horrifically explicit movies of all time. It's the type of movie you watch on accident and never return to again. You may even talk to a therapist about it, like me. For decades after its release, it was banned in the United Kingdom and New Zealand, and was mostly banned in Australia up until 2010. Now, although it was never explicitly banned in the United States, it was involved in the arrest of the owners of a Cincinnati-based bookstore in 1994, after police bought the movie as part of a questionable sting operation. The case, however, was dismissed before a court could determine if the film violated obscenity laws. As of right now, the movie is available in a high-definition transfer from the Criterion Collection, but I implore you not to watch it. Honestly, it shook me to my core. Coming in at number 3, The Human Centipede 2 Full Sequence. The Human Centipede 2 is notorious for being one of the most disgusting films of all time, not to mention having one of the most foul-smelling concepts, as well as a decreasing level of artistry throughout the installment. However, number 2 takes the cake for being one of the most abhorrent and nihilistic movies I have ever watched in my entire life. It is beyond gross out, it is mentally and emotionally scarring. The film centers on a depraved man who goes on a killing spree in order to recreate the experiment portrayed in The Human Centipede. The movie itself was so extreme that the film was initially refused classification by the BBFC, saying, I quote, "No amount of cuts would make the movie acceptable enough to be exhibited or sold." They also raised the possibility that the film could be in violation of the nation's Obscene Publications Act, which the director Tom Six responded to, I quote, "Apparently I made a horrific horror film, but shouldn't a good horror film be horrific? My dear people, it is a f***ing movie." The movie was eventually approved for release after undergoing 2.5 minutes of cuts. The movie as it stands is banned in New Zealand, however the third movie wasn't banned anywhere at all, surprisingly. And I think that's just because it was Coming in at number 2, Necromantic 1 and 2. Directed by Jörg Buttgereit and released in 1987, Necromantic follows a street sweeper who cleans up after grisly accidents, and after he brings home a full corpse for him and his wife to enjoy sexually, he is dismayed to discover his wife prefers the corpse over him. Savage. Now, this film, aside from our number 1 point, is perhaps the most disgusting movie out there, with the movie containing acts of necrophilia and animal cruelty in abundance. Now, unlike a lot of movies on our list, these disturbing moments had a purpose, but still, it was tough to swallow, considering these scenes of sex with corpses were used to creatively further further a story of elite oppression and class struggle. Due to this, the movie was banned in Iceland, Norway, Malaysia, Singapore, New Zealand, Finland, Australia, and a handful of provinces in Canada. Now, the film itself was actually made specifically to protest government censorship, but despite this, the movie faced no real opposition in its home country of Germany until sales became restricted a few years later. Although the reaction from German authorities to the first Necromantic was relatively muted, the release of the sequel, Necromantic 2, certainly made up for it, with the authorities raiding theaters that screened the movie and confiscated prints, making any possession of the film a punishable act. And finally coming in at number 1, a Serbian film. Released in 2010, a Serbian film follows an aging porn star who's struggling to provide for his family. So he agrees to make one last film. Unbeknownst to him, it contains themes of pedophilia, necrophilia, and may end with his death. A Serbian film has over time gained a reputation worldwide for being one of the most extreme and disturbing horror movies ever made, and I can confirm it is horrific. Some of the most horrific moments include the assault of a newborn baby, sex with corpses, and the assault of the protagonist's own child, and that is me putting it tamely. This film is absolutely revolting and should be witnessed by no one. Saying that, it is not surprising in the slightest that it has been banned in Germany, Norway, Brazil, Australia, New Zealand, Malaysia, Spain, and Singapore, with the countries that allowed for the movie's release requiring the movie to undergo censorship cuts, and a lot of them. Following a Serbian film's ban in Spain, the director of a film festival faced criminal charges for daring to show the movie, with the accusation being that the screening constituted exhibition of child pornography. The case was such an overreach in general that the film's director claimed, I quote, "Those prosecutors have no clue what child pornography actually means," and added that the sequences weren't made to be arousing in any way, but to depict the pure horror and brutality of innocence being ruthlessly defiled. Fair point, but still, the film is too extreme for most people, including me. Well, there we have it. Do you guys agree with our list? Were there any illegal horror movies that we missed? Leave us all your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below, and perhaps we can do a part 2. Before I go though, I just want to respond to a few comments from one of our last videos. Top 5 scariest Lovecraftian monsters that can end the world. Michael Waller said Lucy is Nyarlathotep and she is merely playing with us as if we were Legos. Woe is the world when she inevitably gets bored with humanity. Cold hard truth. I would tremble if I were you. Marcus Johnson said the SCP, only known as Lucy, has breached her containment and has started gathering followers. The world has become hers. Well, the world was always mine. Don't forget it. Jin Jam said, I wonder how many references to Lucy being a Lovecraftian horror is going to be in this episode comments. A lot. And I mean a lot. And on that note, if you haven't already, be sure to give this video a big thumbs up, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another scary vid. And until next time, see you later. Released in 1980 and directed by Ruggero Deodato. Ruggero Deodato. Coming in at number 4, Salò or 120 Days of Sodom. Sodom. Woe is the world when she inevitably... Salò or 124... Just 20. Just 120. You know. Just 120. It's fine. We can't help but enjoy a controversial movie, hearing rumors of a horror movie so shocking a country won't even release it, or a movie so shocking you will be arrested for distributing it. That piques most people's interest. We want to know more. But which are the worst of the worst? Well, today on Top 5 Scary Videos, I'm going to be counting down our list of the top 5 scary horror movies that are illegal, part 2. Before we begin though, be sure to stick around until the end of the video where I'll be responding to some of your comments. With that, let's jump in. Also, apologies if my nose starts bleeding. That is something that's happening.
Here's the first motion picture to offer, to the daring, a look into the final, maddening space between life and death.
Coming in at 5, I Spit on Your Grave. Released in 1979 and directed by Miyazaki, I Spit on Your Grave is a rape and revenge horror film that tells the story of Jennifer Hills, a writer based in New York City who exacts revenge on each of her tormentors after 4 men gang rape her and leave her for dead. The movie is a violent slice of horror that was unsurprisingly met with fierce opposition upon its release. Critics such as Roger Ebert refer to it as, I quote, a vile bag of garbage without a shred of artistic distinction, and attending it was one of the most depressing experiences of my life. He also went on to call it so sick, reprehensible and contemptible, and he could barely believe it existed. However, it wasn't just movie critics who hated the movie, entire countries did as well. Canada initially banned the film, however they later allowed individual provinces to decide if it would be allowed within their borders during the 1990s. The UK would only allow the movie to be released in censored form, meaning severe cuts, whereas countries such as Norway, Iceland and West Germany, at the time, banned it outright on the premise that it supported violence against women. However, stranger still, the movie was only banned in Australia 20 years after its release. The ban was rescinded in 2004, however, but not all countries were as lenient, with the film still remaining banned in Ireland to this day. Coming in at 4, SNUFF. Released in 1976 and directed by Michael Finley, SNUFF is a splatter film that is most notorious for being marketed as if it were an actual snuff film. The plot itself revolves around actress Terry London and her producer Max Marsh, who visit an unnamed country in South America. A female biker cult led by a man named Satan stalks and eventually murders the pregnant London and her circle of friends. The movie is very Manson family-esque, before quickly switching gears and becoming a documentary of a young woman being killed by the film's crew. Now, this movie actually has an interesting backstory. Michael Finley went down to Argentina to shoot a quick and dirty movie that would ultimately cash in on the helter-skelter craze, titling it Slaughter. However, the movie was unreleasable, but the then distributor Alan Shackleton had the idea of filming a fake killing, tacking it on the end of the movie and creating rumours that this was the real deal, a real snuff film. So to double down on the urban legend, they renamed the movie Snuff, and then hired fake protesters to picket in front of theatres. It eventually got to the point that the New York's district attorney considered prosecuting a theatre owner who was showing it. However, Variety were the first to expose the movie and its publicity stunts as hoaxes.
This is the true story of 4 innocent young actresses who thought they were making just another movie, but didn't know they were making the ultimate movie.
Coming in at number 3, Traces of Death. Released in 1993 and directed by Damon Fox, Traces of Death is a Z-Movie Mondo shockumentary that consists of various scenes of stock footage depicting death and real scenes of violence. Unlike the movie Faces of Death, which included fake deaths and reenactments, Traces is for the most part real and consists of public domain footage depicting death and injury. As you would expect, the movie was met with rejection all across the globe, and in 2005 the BBFC refused to give the first film an age certificate, effectively banning it. They deemed the movie to have no journalistic, educational or other justifying content for the images shown, while also suggesting that the film could potentially breach the UK laws under the Obscene Publications Act. The entire series has been subject to confiscation by customs authorities in Australia, and according to the country's regulations, I quote, "They offend against the standards of morality, decency and propriety generally accepted by reasonable adults to the extent that they should not be imported." Honestly, this film is absolutely disgusting and should never be watched. Coming in at 2, Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer. Released in 1986 and directed by John McNaughton, Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer is a psychological horror about the random crime spree of a serial killer who seemingly operates with impunity. The film was, as expected, quite controversial. In the UK, the film has had a long and complex relationship with our friends the BBFC, with them refusing certification for many years. Now, the film's production company didn't even want to give the movie a theatrical release, which is a surprise, leaving the director to personally send out screener copies to critics in hopes of drumming up buzz. However, no one was willing, simply because the MPAA gave the movie an X rating, which at the time was mostly reserved for porno films. The film has heavy violence, which actually aided in the creation of the NC-17 rating, a distinction for movies with extreme content that don't quite cross the line into porn. But you may be asking, what happened to the film in Australia and New Zealand? Well, the film was originally outright banned by the film censor in 1992. A censored version was subsequently released on home video with cuts to the family massacre sequence, and was released on DVD in 2005.
Look at the world. It's either you or them. You know what I mean.
And
finally coming in at number 1, The Last House on the Left. Released in 1972 and directed by the legendary Wes Craven, The Last House on the Left is an exploitation horror film that revolves around 2 teenage girls who were taken into the woods and tortured by a gang of murderous thugs. Now, this movie was actually Craven's directorial debut and was loosely inspired by Ingmar Bergman's The Virgin Spring, and in turn received vicious censoring, resulting in it being banned in certain countries for decades. The film was explicit, particularly the torture scene, and therefore the United Kingdom refused a certificate for cinema release by the BBFC in 1974 due to the scenes of sadism and violence. The film was ultimately banned throughout the remainder of the 1980s and into the 1990s. However, after a series of major cuts, the movie is now available for viewing. That itself didn't happen until 2008. To top it off, no one even bothered to attempt to distribute it in Australia due to the monumental problems it would have caused. It actually wasn't even released down under until 2004. How crazy is that? The New York Times critics, Howard Thompson, even admitted to walking out after just 50 minutes of this sickening tripe. Fun fact for you all, when it was no longer banned, my parents bought it for me. Merry Christmas. Well, there we have it. Do you guys agree with our list? Were there any illegal horror movies that we missed? Leave us all your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below, and perhaps we can do a part 3. Before I go though, I just want to respond to a few comments from one of our last videos. Top 5 scariest cosmic horror movies part 3. John Shadwick said, just as she promised, Lucy has gotten rid of Jack. I mean, I did promise it, but now that he's gone, I have regrets. Tutti Frutti said, if we join the cult, is wearing the hat mandatory? No, only I wear the hat. Don't even try that. Don't make that move. Tiffany Benefield said, Lucy, the hat is slowly gathering a following, but wear the hat. I know, at this rate, the hat's gonna have more Instagram followers than I am. And on that note, if you haven't already, be sure to give this video a big thumbs up, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another scary vid. And until next time, see you later. Decency and propriety generally accept. The entire series of the straight to video traces. What? We are here again and already onto part 3. How did that happen? We all love a controversial movie, something too disturbing for authorities to handle, to the point that an entire country has to ban distribution of the movie. Absolutely insane, right? Well, today on Top 5 Scary Videos, I'm going to be counting down our list of the top 5 scary horror movies that are illegal part 3. Before we begin though, be sure to stick around until the end of the video where I'll be responding to some of your comments. And with that, let's jump in. Coming in at number 5, Possession. Directed by Andrzej Zulawski and released in 1981, Possession follows the relationship between an international spy and his wife, who begins exhibiting increasingly disturbing behavior after asking for a divorce. Possession is an international co-production between France and West Germany at the time, and was filmed in Berlin in 1980. The film went on to debut at the Cannes Film Festival, where Adjani won the award for Best Actress for her performance. However, not all critics agreed. Reviewing the movie after its screening at the San Francisco International Film Festival, Wayman Wong panned the movie as a sick and violent piece of trash. Savage. After an initial limited theatre release in the United Kingdom, the film was banned as one of the notorious video nasties, although it was later released uncut on VHS and DVD in 2000, 20 years after the film's initial release. Absolutely insane. In the years following its release, Possession has acquired a cult following, with folks deeming it, I quote, one of the most enigmatic and uncompromising horror movies in the history of cinema. I don't agree, but to each their own. Coming in at number 4, The Evil Dead. Directed by Sam Raimi and released in 1981, The Evil Dead tells the story of 5 friends who travel to a remote cabin in the woods, where they play a tape with incantations. This in turn releases the demons, which possess them in succession until one is left fighting for survival. Like all of the movies on our list, the release was met with controversy due to Raimi making the movie as gruesome as possible, with neither interest in nor fear of censorship, which led to the movie receiving an X rating and being named a video nasty. Films with this label were typically violent and disturbing, and the rating was often held by pornographic and other X-rated films. Of course, The Evil Dead is not pornographic, however it is considered to be one of the most violent movies of its time, with it even being dubbed #1 nasty. The movie was banned in Germany, Iceland, Finland, Ukraine, Singapore and other countries upon its release, and it was also one of the very first films deemed a video nasty. The Evil Dead is one of the most notorious splatter films of its day, along with some previous mentions including Cannibal Holocaust and I Spit on Your Grave. The film was and is still banned, either theatrically or on video in a lot of countries, which is insane. Not a lot of people know that. Coming in at 3, A Clockwork Orange. Directed by the legendary Stanley Kubrick, one of my all-time favourites, and released in 1971, A Clockwork Orange follows Alex, a psychopathic delinquent who is imprisoned for murder and rape. In order to reduce his sentence though, he volunteers for an experimental therapy conducted by the government, but it goes askew. Now the film as a whole employs disturbing violent images to comment on psychiatry, juvenile delinquency, youth gangs and other social, political and economic subjects in a dystopian Britain. Now, although the movie received critical acclaim and was nominated for several awards including an Academy Award, the movie was met with backlash and controversy. In the United States, the movie was given an X rating, resulting in the movie undergoing 30 seconds of sexually explicit cuts to obtain an R rating and have a re-release the following year. Because of the explicit sex and violence, the National Catholic Office for Motion Pictures rated it C, meaning condemned, a rating which forbade Roman Catholics seeing the film. Now, although the movie was passed uncut for UK cinema in December 1971, British authorities considered the sexual violence in the movie to be too extreme, and during the trial of a 14-year-old male accused of manslaughter of a classmate, the prosecutor referred to A Clockwork Orange, suggesting that the film had a macabre relevance to the case. The press also blamed the film for a rape in which the attackers sang Singing in the Rain, something that occurs in the movie. The film was ultimately withdrawn from British release in 1973. It was only after Kubrick died in 1999 that the film was theatrically re-released and made available for sale. Fun fact, it was actually filmed at my university. The more you know. Coming in at number 2, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Directed by Tobe Hooper and released in 1974, this iconic horror movie would be banned all over the world almost immediately upon its release. The movie follows Sally, Franklin, and their 3 friends who run out of gas while driving to their grandfather's house, and one by one they are tormented and killed by a chainsaw-wielding killer and his psychopathic family. Now, controversy began almost instantly, with the film being marketed as being based on true events in order to attract a wider audience and to act as a subtle commentary on the era's political climate. It was reported that Hooper hoped that the MPAA would give the complete uncut release print a PG rating due to its minimal amount of visible gore. Instead, it was rated X, which was originally only assigned to pornos. However, after several cuts it received an R rating. After its initial release in Britain, the movie was banned on the advice of BBFC Secretary Stephen Murphy. While the ban was enforced, the word chainsaw itself was also barred from movie titles, forcing imitators to rename their films. In San Francisco, cinema-goers walked out of theaters in disgust, and in February 1976, 2 theaters in Ottawa, Canada were advised by local police to withdraw the film lest they face morality charges. By the end of its cinema run, the movie was effectively banned in the UK, Brazil, Australia, West Germany, Chile, Iceland, Ireland, Norway, Singapore and Sweden. However, that aside, as one of the first slasher films, it is credited with giving birth to a number of horror tropes, and is by far one of the most influential horror movies of all time. And finally, coming in at number 1, The Exorcist. Directed by William Friedkin and released in 1973, The Exorcist of course tells the tale of a young girl named Reagan who inadvertently summons the demon Pazuzu, who possesses the young girl and tortures her until an exorcism can be performed. The film was one of that year's highest grossing movies, surprisingly, considering the controversy surrounding it. Audience members walked out, some fainted, vomited and others cried and screamed when the film was unleashed upon the world. To quote Newsweek on February 2nd, 1974, "On December 26th, a movie called The Exorcist opened in theaters across the country, and since then, all hell has broken loose." The movie grossed $1.9 million in its first week, setting house records in each theater. Now, what initially caused some controversy was the angiography scene in which a needle is inserted into Reagan's neck and blood spurts out. A procedure Friedkin states was actually performed on camera, with many critics calling it a needless seen, and genuinely disturbing. The movie was released in London on March 14th, 1974, and was instantly met with protest around the UK by the nationwide Festival of Light, a Christian public action group concerned with the influence of media on society, in particular the young. The protests involved members of the local clergy and citizens handing out leaflets to those queuing to see the film, offering spiritual support for those who asked for it. Now, the film was available on home video in the early 80s, however, due to the film's notoriety, young viewers began to seek it out, of course, resulting in all copies being withdrawn from the UK in 1986, remaining unavailable for purchase until 1999, effectively banning the movie. Well, there we have it. Do you guys agree with that list? Were there any illegal horror movies that we missed? Leave us all your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below, and perhaps we can do a part 4. Before I go though, I just want to respond to a few comments from one of our last videos. Top 5 scariest giant creatures from folklore. Lord Inquisitor Ignis said, "I'm impressed with your pronunciation, Lucy." Thank you. It took a long time. Google saved me. Aeona Little Eagle said, "My Dark Queen Lucifer, when you decide to finally take over Mother Earth, may I please put in an application to be your Dark Jester?" Sure, why not? I don't like comedy, but I like company, so by all means. Wild Rose 39 said, "Hey Lucy, hope no more problems with nosebleeds. Keep safe and Merry Christmas." No nosebleeds after the great nosebleed of 2019. No more. Don Schultz said, "Lucy is an amazing host, always interesting." Thank you very much. And on that note, if you haven't already, be sure to give this video a big thumbs up, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another scary vid. And until next time, see you later. Banning a movie instantly makes it more notorious. People begin talking about it, perhaps they attempt to hunt it down, even show it on a Friday movie night. However, some movies are just straight up illegal to own, maybe even to watch in specific countries. So today on Top 5 Scary Videos, I'm going to be counting down our list of the top 5 scary horror movies that are illegal, part 4. Before we begin though, be sure to stick around until the end of the video where I'll be responding to some of your comments. And with that, let's jump in. Coming in at 5, Land of the Dead, 2005. Land of the Dead is a 2005 post-apocalyptic horror movie written and directed by George A. Romero, the 4th of Romero's 6 Living Dead movies. It is preceded by Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, and Day of the Dead. The story deals with the zombie assault on Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where a feudal-like government exists. The survivors in the film have fled to the Golden Triangle area of downtown Pittsburgh. The region is protected on 2 sides by rivers and on the 3rd by an electric barricade that survivors term the Throat. Land of the Dead is the first film in the series to receive an MPAA rating for its theatrical release. The more extreme instances of gore were obscured by foreground elements filmed on blue screens, so that these overlaid elements could easily be removed from the unrated DVD. So why exactly was this movie so controversial? Well, according to Variety, the movie was banned for its portrayal of cannibalism, not because of its scenes of humans getting devoured, but due to concerns that such content would bring up negative memories surrounding the Holodomor, a wave of famine which struck the nation in 1933. In Germany, both the theatrical and unrated versions were rated 18, and in Ukraine the film was outright banned. Coming in at 4, Hostel and Hostel Part 2. Hostel is a 2005 slasher film written and directed by Eli Roth. It is also the first installment of the Hostel trilogy, followed by Hostel Part 2 and Hostel Part 3. The plot essentially follows a mysterious organization that tortures and kills kidnapped tourists, specifically 3 friends who are traveling across Europe. Now, as you would expect, a lot of Europeans had issue with the first Hostel movie for making the continent seem like a depraved, torturous place where Americans go to die. However, saying that, it was only in Ukraine that the movie pissed enough people off for it to be banned outright. Both Hostel and its sequel were outlawed in the country for its excessive torture, as well as for depicting Ukraine as a place where tourists disappear for money. Let's discuss Hostel Part 2 though. Released in 2007 and directed once again by Eli Roth, the plot follows 3 American female art students in Rome, who are directed to a Slavic village where they are kidnapped and taken to a facility in which rich clients pay to torture and kill people. The film has been restricted to adults in most countries, however it has been cut in Germany, and the German extended version has subsequently been banned in Germany. A court in Munich ruled the release of the film to be punishable by law. The film was then banned outright in New Zealand upon a submission to the ratings board, after the distributor refused to make cuts in order to receive an R rating. On October 8, 2007, the film was cited in the House of Commons of the United Kingdom as an example where stills from the film could be illegal to possess under the proposed law to criminalize possession of extreme pornography. Coming in at 3, The Devils, 1971. The Devils is a 1971 British historical drama drama horror movie directed by Ken Russell and starring Oliver Reed and Vanessa Redgrave. The film is a dramatized historical account of the rise and fall of Urbain Grandier, a 17th century Roman Catholic priest executed for witchcraft following the supposed possessions in Loudun, France. It also focuses on Sister Jeannie de Anges, a sexually repressed nun who inadvertently incites the accusations. The Devils was partly adapted from the 1952 non-fiction book The Devils of Loudun by Aldous Huxley, and partly on the 1960 play The Devils by John Whiting, also based on Huxley's book. The film faced harsh criticism upon its release from the national film rating systems due to its disturbingly violent sexual and religious content, and originally received an X rating in both the United Kingdom and the United States. It was also banned in several countries and in turn heavily edited for release in others. The explicit sexual and violent content paired with its commentary on religious institutions resulted in the film suffering significant censorship. Commenting on the movie's nature, Reed stated, "We never set out to make a pretty Christian film. Charlton Heston made enough of those. The film is about twisted people." The movie has actually never received a release in its original uncut form, saying that critics dismissed the film for its explicit content, though it did go on to win the awards for Best Director at the Venice Film Festival, as well as from the US National Board of Review. The Devils received critical backlash upon its release due to its outrageous, overheated and pornographic nature, and went on to be publicly condemned by the Vatican. Coming in at 2, Ilse She-Wolf of the SS. Ilse She-Wolf of the SS is a 1975 Canadian Nazi-ploitation sexploitation film directed by Don Edmonds and written by Jonah Royston. The plot centers on Ilse, a commandant of a Nazi prison camp who conducts sadistic scientific experiments designed to demonstrate that women are more capable of enduring pain than men are, and therefore should be allowed to fight in the German armed forces. Ilse She-Wolf of the SS has received primarily negative reviews, as you would expect, and holds a 36% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes. The Independent Film Journal described it as, "Only the most dangerously sadistic mentalities will manage to sit voluntarily through more than 10 minutes of Ilse She-Wolf of the SS, a graphic, stomach-churning catalogue of Nazi medical atrocities that makes Texas Chainsaw Massacre look like a Sunday picnic. Theaters catering to the lowest possible grade of audience could make a bundle of dirty money." Others would be wise to forget it. However, more interesting still, the film's director Don Edmonds described the movie screenplay as the worst piece of I have ever read. Interesting. It is certainly not hard to see why this movie was banned, with the commander literally torturing prisoners in an effort to prove their threshold for pain, in turn being rejected in multiple countries even to this day. If I were you, I'd steer clear of Ilse She-Wolf of the SS. And finally coming in at number 1, Freaks 1932. Freaks is a 1932 pre-code horror movie produced and directed by Todd Browning. For those who don't know, pre-code refers to the period of time in Hollywood where film was transitioning into talkies, and it was no holds barred. Films could get away with so much without there being any repercussions. That was until the Code Authority came along and changed everything. However, I digress, we'll return to that later. The movie itself follows a trapeze artist who joins a group of carnival sideshow performers with a plan to seduce and murder a dwarf in the group to gain his inheritance, but her plot proved to have dangerous consequences. The film is based on elements from the short story Spurs by Todd Robbins. The movie was given a test screening with audience members reacting negatively to the movie's grotesque content. In response to this, the movie was significantly cut and additional footage was incorporated. However, despite the cuts made to the movie, Freaks still garnered notice due to the fact that its eponymous characters were portrayed by people who worked as sideshow performers and had real disabilities. Due to this, the film was banned in the United Kingdom for over 30 years and was labelled as brutal and grotesque in Canada. Although it received critical backlash, Freaks was subject to reappraisal in the 60s and has since been shown frequently throughout the United States as a midnight movie. As of right now, Freaks holds an approval rating of 94% on Rotten Tomatoes, with the general consensus reading, "Time has been kind to this horror legend. Freaks managed to frighten, shock and even touch viewers in ways that contemporary viewers missed, and still holds true. Freaks, in my opinion, is one of the most important pieces of horror cinema and still remains one of the most disturbing films I've had the pleasure of watching." Also wrote my entire university dissertation on it. So, well, there we have it. Do you guys agree with that list? Were there any illegal horror movies that we missed? Leave us all your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below and perhaps we can do a part 5. Before I go though, I just want to respond to a few comments from one of our last videos. Top 5 scary SCPs based on real things. Mark Nikash said, "I'm losing my over Lucy's hat. That should be an SCP in itself, or number 1 on the list of mysterious objects said to cause hysteria." I still don't understand the fascination with the hat. It is just a hat from H&M. It's pretty basic, to be honest, but to each their own. Die733 said, "Lucy, what's your favourite animal?" Like a monkey, props.
I like cats. Big fan of dogs. Oh, I love hippos. Liam Wagner said, The Hat! Yes, The Hat was back. Enormous Gaming said, Lucy SCP codename The Pale Queen bows. Bow away. Good for you. And on that note, if you haven't already, be sure to give this video a big thumbs up, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another scary vid. And until next time, see you later. It also focuses on Sister Jeannie design. It also focuses on Sister Jeannie de Angie's Sister Jeannie de Angie's is sexually although it received critical backlash, Freak was.
Oh damn, we're back again with some more morally dubious movies. That's right, we've got a brand new smattering of video nasties and flicks that are just nasty. Pop a Gravol and keep the barf bags ready because none of these are an easy watch. Hello horror heads and welcome back to the scariest channel on YouTube, Top 5 Scary Videos. I'm your horror host Keegan Hughes, and today we're adding to a list that's already 20 entries long. Yep, it's time for the Top 5 Scary Horror Movies That Are Illegal, Part 5. No, they're not impossible to find worldwide, and yes, making movies illegal is a bit of a ridiculous practice, but it happens, so prepare yourself and maybe shut the door in case somebody walks in. Before we get going, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe for more banned barf fests. Wicked. Let's begin. Coming in at number 5, we've got Nightmares and a Damaged Brain. Also known as Nightmare, this 1981 slasher was written and directed by Romano Scavolini. If you were around in the 70s and recognize that name, raise your hand. And you're all exposing yourselves. Scavolini was a prolific hardcore pornographer before hopping into the exploitation flick biz, so give your head a shake, and maybe some other parts of yourself as well. The lurid contents of his previous works is on full display in this shocking slasher, but we'll get to the nitty-gritty in a moment. The plot focuses on a lunatic being experimented on in an asylum of sorts. Our maniac was incarcerated for mutilating and murdering a family, and now the scientists down in the lab are trying to reprogram his brain using experimental drugs. It seems to work, and he's looking and acting like a normal guy when he's released. Obviously, it doesn't last for very long though. Soon enough, he's on the road from New York to Florida with the express purpose of murdering his ex-wife and children. After a few bloody, nude-bodied messes, he has a flashback which explains exactly why he is the way he is. Plays out similarly to 1980's Maniac, starring Joe Spinell. Mr. Damaged Brain recalls some trauma from his childhood involving sadomasochism and a fire axe to the head. Of course, this made its way into the video nasties list in the UK, but Nightmare actually has a noteworthy nasty accolade. It is the only movie where prosecution went through and had the distributor incarcerated. David Hamilton Grant was jailed for 6 months after releasing a cut with a little extra bit of violent footage. Imagine that. I'm sure Grant loves to tell that story these days. The controversy doesn't end there either. Promotional material claims that Tom Savini did the special effects, and he is indeed credited for it during the end crawl. However, Savini vehemently denies working on this film, despite multiple witness accounts and photos of him on set. Maybe he just doesn't want to be associated with the flick that got someone sent to prison. Coming in at number 4, Cannibal Ferox, aka Make Them Die Slowly, aka Woman from Deep River. This movie got multiple releases and titles and levels of violence depending on the country that it was being distributed in. The US distributor claimed that the Italian cannibal exploitation film was the most violent film ever made. I don't know how you would actually go about measuring something like that, but go off. There were also claims made that Umberto Lenzi's flick was banned in 31 countries. Again, no solid evidence of this, but it's at least banned in 1. Featuring plenty of nasty stuff like cocaine and emerald-fueled rage, the torture and burning of bodies in front of a crowd, booby traps, piranhas, nudity, violence upon nude bodies, hanging a woman via hooks through her chest, the violent removal of a man's junk, and cracking open a skull like a hard-boiled egg before eating the soft stuff inside. Yes, this made the video nasties list. Graphic violence and animal cruelty were the reasons why, which lines up pretty well with the values of the list. Even more recently in 2018, 2 minutes were cut from a resubmission for animal violence. You just can't win when making a gross out flick. Coming in at number 3, we've got The Bunny Game. It's hard to make a movie about a drug addicted sex worker getting kidnapped by a serial killer truck driver who tortures her for days in the desert without raising a few eyebrows. But Rodleen Getzig and Adam Rehmeyer thought it could be done. Unfortunately, the BBFC banned the movie, giving this statement. The principal focus of the bunny game is an unremitting sexual and physical abuse of a helpless woman, as well as the sadistic and sexual pleasure the man derives from this. Getzig and Remeyer refute this analysis of their movie and claim that instead it's a piece of art that contains multitudes. A lot of this indignance seems to stem from the work put in by the filmmakers to avoid being pornographic and instead showing a realistic portrayal of the dangers of the world. They wanted to make a movie that never held back, one where anything goes. So off they went into the desert with Remeyer as a one-man crew, Getzig and non-actor Jeff Renfro as the cast. The filming of this flick is more performance art than anything, and everything aside from the drugs and alcohol depicted is real. Getzig fasted for 40 days to get into the proper headspace and physique for her helpless sex worker character. She really couldn't have fought back against Renfro even if she tried. Yes, she really did get branded. According to an article she wrote for CineXS, it didn't even hurt. While many watching the movie may see it as another art house snuff style film, the filmmakers rally for it to be seen as a radical cinematic act of resistance. Of course, it's up to the audience in the end to decide what it represents. Although Getzig does make an interesting point in her writing. Society is often underexposed to deviant behavior, which may lead to more heinous crimes. A film like The Bunny Game presents a much more realistic and visceral portrayal of sex work compared to something like Pretty Woman. If you're not careful out in the real world, you're likely to get hurt, not picked up by the rich guy of your dreams. Fair enough. Coming in at number 2, August Underground. Fred Vogel just can't catch a break crossing borders. He and Alan Peters are responsible for creating the August Underground and its sequels, which are basically exploitation flicks presented as home video snuff films. August Underground, the first in the trilogy, is basically two buddies going around, getting drunk, giggling, and viciously killing innocent people. That's about it plot-wise. Shot in a home movie style, August Underground is comprised of purposefully low-res, degraded footage. The video tears and pixelates, the sound is terrible, and it cuts in and out at unexpected junctures. This, of course, makes the whole experience more believable and allows them to hide their inexpensive special effects more effectively. Each movie was supposedly shot for next to nothing, but the effects never show that cash-strapped reality. No, it seriously looks like a snuff film in all its grimy, grisly glory. Did I say glory? I meant to say gory. Stomach churning too. I can't think of a way to sum up how stomach churning the effect is while remaining grammatically correct. While traveling to Toronto for the Rue Morgue Festival of Fear, Vogel was arrested pending charges of transporting obscene materials into Canada. Copies of the August Underground trilogy were found among the merch Vogel planned to sell at the festival, and he was kept in customs prison for 10 hours. The charges were eventually dropped, but his films were sent to Ottawa for further observation. Says a lot for how freakishly realistic these films are. A similar thing happened in 2004 while heading to Australia. The movies were confiscated by Australian customs officials as they offend against standards of morality, decency, and propriety generally accepted by a reasonable adult to the extent that they should not be imported. Yeah, that sounds about right. And lastly, at number 1, Guinea Pig. Oh boy. These movies are they require a certain level of mental fortitude and endurance that not many folks possess. There's a whole series of them, but as their numbers rose, they became more darkly comedic and less explicitly disturbing. The first two, however, are plotless. The epitome of torture porn, hyper-focused on torture, mutilation, and gore. The first, known as Guinea Pig, Devil's Experiment, or Unabridged Agony, can be summarized thusly. A group of men kidnap a young woman and graphically torture her. She's beaten, pinched with pliers, burned with hot oil, covered in maggots, and has her eye punctured by a hot wire. The special effects are nothing short of mind-boggling, but the experience itself is beyond unsettling. This continues into the second movie, Guinea Pig 2, Flower of Flesh and Blood. A samurai kidnaps a girl and meticulously chops her body to bits. Again, the special effects are stunningly realistic, but nobody would ever say that it was fun to watch or left them feeling elated. Multiple Japanese boards of education banned the film, having it withdrawn from the market at large. At some point in the 90s though, Charlie Sheen supposedly came across a bootleg of the film and was so distraught that he called the police, thinking that it was a legitimate snuff film. At that point, the FBI had purportedly already opened an inquiry into the film and those involved in its production. Even more controversy followed after a copy of one of the later films in the series was found in the home of a serial killer. Many seem to believe that the killer was inspired by the events in the movie, as one of his victims resembled the woman from Flower of Flesh and Blood. Later it was confirmed that the serial killer's movie was not Guinea Pig 2, but the stigma remained. It's easier to get a copy of guinea pig flicks internationally these days, but some remain banned in Japan. We've covered some wholly disturbing ground today, haven't we? How many of these flicks have you seen? Any others that deserve a spot in the hallowed, horrid halls of infamy? Make sure you let me know down in the comments. Speaking of comments, let's take a quick look at some of your more palatable ones from the top 5 scary SCP creatures based on food. Iron Ox says natural ghosts come from people who haven't had plastic surgery. Those who have are artificially enhanced ghosts. That is a fascinating proposition. Now that I think about it, most ghosts keep their physical changes when they die, right? So why wouldn't they keep their plastic surgery results? Arn Gear says, I'll take a few of them cakes, thank you. Hey, be careful, alright? Once you start, the Foundation won't let you stop. Eagle Snort the Dancing Lobster says, not first. Finally, someone gets it right. Congratulations, Feegle Snort. Huffles says, couldn't they use SCP-294 to take blood samples from Kane and other difficult SCPs? That's a really good idea. Somebody promote this guy. And Nezuko999 says, speaking of food, I have 2 ideas for Taco Bell. A Cheetos taco where the shell is made of Cheetos, and my other idea, a Cheetos burrito where the Cheetos in the burritos and the cheese sauce. I wish I could give corporate the idea, but I don't know how to contact them. Personally, I think the Cheeto burrito is a winner. The taco would fall apart too fast. Cheetos don't have the same structural integrity as Doritos. Consider this your signal boost. Maybe somebody over at Taco Bell corporate likes top 5. That's all the time we have for today. Before I head out and trip into a deep fryer, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe for more mangled movies. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.